the name, that he is everything there is, everything there was, everything there will be, today, yesterday, and tomorrow. And that he has the authority to judge our situation and has the authority to bring us redemption, restoration, deliverance, and rest, if we will believe and receive. So, how do we view demons in the Bible? Are we viewing these people as, are we viewing these things as people in the Bible that are possessed by demons? Or is Elohim trying to tell us something to pay attention to? Very likely, the story tells us a history of a person that was possessed. It tells us the history of the Talmudim trying to cast that whatever problem was there. The person was actually possessed, or whether they had a mental problem or epilepsy or ADD. They didn't have ADD back then. You sent the child outside to play. And then Yahshua comes and casts us out. But that's what I'm getting. People are going to say, well, he's full of the devil. Because they read the story and they say, well, it was demons. Why did Yahshua cast the demons out into a herd of swine? Why did that demonic presence inside this man say, send us into that herd of swine? We can't understand this if we don't understand Leviticus. Leviticus that tells us that not to eat the swine because it is unclean to you. What does that mean? It means that we shouldn't take in things that encapsulate immorality. We shouldn't take in things that encapsulate a lack of ethics. We shouldn't take in things that encapsulate idolatry. What does Yahshua do? It delivers us from these things, and these things go back into that enclosure that they belong. The swine, the word for swine, gazir, means an enclosure. Send it back into the enclosure that it belongs, and then it goes running off the cliff, it dies, and we become clean.
That's good.
But we look at it as a story that this was some guy with a demon that was running around naked, freaking people out. So we have to be able to go beyond the bashat, the superficial looking. We have to be able to go to the next level, which is remez. Remez is reading one scripture, but remembering that there's scriptures before it and scriptures after it that you can link together to understand why it says what it says.
She always taught me, find at least 3 places.
Yeah. And it's, it's like the studies that we did over the last couple of weeks. They start in the beginning, they work their way through the middle, and they end up in the end. You have to have, you can't make a determination out of 2 scriptures of Brit Hadashah if you can't support those 2 out of Torah. You can't make an assumption out of something that's found in the prophets and the writings if it's not supported in Torah and it's not confirmed in the words of Yahshua. I'm not talking about the words of Peter or Paul or John or Judah or Jacob. I'm talking about strictly Brit Hadashah. When I say Brit Hadashah, I'm talking about the four Gospels. Everything else is commentary on the Gospels. But in our little group here, we spend a lot of time in the 4th area of study. We're kind of in the third area is called Drash. Is going a little bit deeper into the interpretation, but still relying heavily on scripture and interpretations, rabbinical interpretations. But when we get into the last interpretation that's called Soph, then that's where we begin to ask, why did 4 men carry the paralytic? And why is it that they couldn't go through the door? Why did they have to go onto the roof? Why did they have to make a hole in the roof? Why did they have to lower the paralytic down in front of Yahshua? We can say, oh, well, this is a story. It shows, oh, look at all the faith they had. They couldn't get in, that they went up there and they cut a hole in this guy's roof so that this guy could come before Jesus and be saved and be healed. But what is it telling us? Why 4 guys? Why? I mean, this guy's a paralytic. He probably hasn't, walked around or nothing. Probably can't eat because he's poor. He's probably skinny. Why didn't 2 people carry him? Why didn't 1 person just carry him in? Why did it take 4 people to carry him? So we take our understanding of Soph, and we take our understanding of, we understand the letters, what the letters mean. 4, it's Dalet. Dalet represents spiritual poverty. This man was paralyzed and being carried by his spiritual poverty. Have I ever been to the point in my life where I am literally crippled by my situation that it makes me so spiritually poor that I'm paralyzed, I can't move, I can't do anything? And I just lay there. It isn't until I seek the realm of Elohim, go up, that I can come into the presence of his restoration. But without that 4th level of study, which is Soph, we never get there. And we're not going to get there if all we see is stories and narratives. We remain in the dark. I don't know if that was an answer to a question or not, but it sounded pretty good.
That was in the fortune cookie?
Yeah, it was a fortune cookie. Heaven and hell, those are things that we're going to have to discuss at length, because these are things that were developed. These were things that were developed in the 3rd and 4th centuries that adversely affected Judaism, but was used by what was becoming the Catholic Church as leverage to keep people in fear. You do everything the church tells you, you pay your money to the church, then you're going to go to heaven. You don't do what the church tells you, then it's sin, and you're going to go to this horrible, terrible place called hell. And your family's probably already there, so if you want to get your family out of this terrible place called hell, you need to pay the church money. And you pay us indulgences, and we'll sell you this. We'll sell you this beautiful matzah cover. This will get your parents into purgatory, but if you'll buy the matzah cover and the bag clip, then that'll get them into heaven, and that'll keep them there for a month. But you have to make a monthly stipend payment to the church in order to keep them there, so that the Pope, the Vicar of Christ, will have good favor and keep your parents, your brother, your sister, your dog, your cat out of hell.
Where is that written in the scripture?
Yeah, it's in there. It's in Scripture. It's in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Because up until maybe 75 years ago, you weren't allowed to own a Bible if you were Catholic. It was the priest explained it to you, and that's just the way it was. If you had a question, you went to church, and if you had another bigger question, you went to confession. And that's the way it was. It was illegal by penalty of death to own a copy of the scriptures yourself during the Dark Ages. Only the priest could interpret it. Most of the priests were illiterate, so only the bishops could interpret it. These were the ones that were making the money. This is why you have a lot of people that got burned at the stake when they started to take it out of Latin or Greek and put it into their own language. But, like I say, you have the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and you can buy them by the dozen for $1 at half-price books in the clearance aisle. But you open it up and you read through the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and you'd be surprised at how much of the Catechism, your Baptists, and your Pentecostals, and your Methodists and Lutherans, and how much your modern-day Protestant Christians that were so reformed by the Reformation, you'd be surprised at how much of the Catholic Catechism they still keep. They didn't reform that much. They just changed it from one language to the other.
Reformed, centralized rulership route.
Yeah. So we ask, it takes us back to what's the difference between light and darkness? Yahshua was the light. He came here to bring restoration to the Word. His Talmudim absorbed it, learned it, taught it. When they died off, then you had usurpers that came in. You had Polycarp studied under John, and he taught things the way they were. But you have Ignatius, who decided that he didn't want to go by what the Jerusalem Council said anymore. And he made himself Bishop of Antioch, and then he started saying, we're not going to do any of that Jewish stuff. We're not going to keep the Jewish feasts, even though the Torah says that they're what? The feasts and festivals of Yahweh Elohim. They're his feasts and festivals. We're not going to keep that. We're going to ban Hebrew and put everything in Latin. And then it went into Greek. And before you know it, everything that Yahshua taught and everything that the Talmudim taught is now a mumble-jumbled mess.
It's like the gossip game.
There's a book, and there's a really good book, if you have time to read. It's called The Nazarene Jewish Manifesto. Nazarene Jewish Manifesto. And it's written by a local guy, actually. He lives in Hearst. His name is Dr. James Trim. And it's really amazing. He was with the Institute for Scripture Research for a long time. He was involved in getting the translation called the Scriptures out, and he actually was instrumental in translating the Scriptures Hebraic Roots Edition that actually has is taken from the Aramaic Peshitta instead of the Textus Receptus, and this is a problem that we still have with most of our Bibles. This one here is an Aramaic rendition, but it has a lot of problems too. But that here's what I've been faced with here. I'm trying to find a good Bible to use. I mean, we're compiling Torahs. We've compiled our Torah, and we'll start to be getting our prophets. But you can't carry around a book that's this thick and this big, break your arm. So I've been looking for the right combination, and it's difficult to find because they either use the Textus Receptus that comes from Erasmus's interpretation of the Vulgate, which is all screwy, or they've got the Aramaic in there, but it's still all goofed up somewhere else. But that's what happened. You got so many translations now, and what do? Here for a while, you had a new translation coming out every month. So, yeah, that's. But no, we'll talk about some of those subjects as we go along, because now we just finished talking about Matthew 24 and Thessalonians 4. So now, I guess in a way we're stuck having to talk about the judgment seat of Mashiach, and we're kind of stuck having to talk about the marriage supper of the Lamb, and we're kind of stuck having to go into the white throne judgment, because it's kind of like leaving it hanging there. These are things that I'm not comfortable teaching about. I understand, but when you start teaching about it, people that have studied it from one point of view for so long, and you start bringing out scripture that backs it all the way through, and they say, oh my goodness, that's not what I understood at all. And then, yeah, then you can go fishing because you've got a whole bunch of cans of worms. So, but, yeah. Questions? Yom Teruah. I brought these. I've got 10 more. I ran out of comb thingies, so I'm going to go buy some more comb thingies. I've got an improved cover. I'd already made these before I put this in, so I just hand wrote all that in.
That's great.
But I've got it with regular scripture. But Yom Teruah, we've been together for 2 years. We really haven't jumped into doing anything particular on Yom Teruah other than getting together and having a little lesson and doing a mikveh, but because we've always kept it as Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah, we've always said, oh, well, it's the Jewish New Year. And going back to, well, this last lesson kind of pushed me a little bit to say, hey, maybe it's time to start teaching this stuff from the scripture, or from the sacred calendar point of view as opposed to the civil calendar point of view, and maybe start teaching it from what scripture says as opposed to what the rabbis have taught us. So Yom Teruah, as opposed to being the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah is the head of the year. The Yom Teruah means the day of remembrance. And what we remember is here at Vayikra 23:24, or verse 24 on the front here, that Elohim is talking to Moses, and he says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall be a solemn rest unto you, a memorial proclaimed with the voice of the shofar, a set-apart convocation. And you read that out of King Jimmy or anything else, a holy convocation. What is a holy convocation? What does holy mean? Holy means, it's sacred. It's going to lift it up and exalt it or something. But the word kadashim means to set it apart. It has to be distinct. the word convocation